All right, so hopefully we're recording video this time. We'll see. Really hoping I don't have to record this over again. So last session, as most don't know, or most do know now, I think, we recorded all voice last time. I've been playing with Zoom, making sure things are working right. We just recently tested to see if I can export a video file, and guess what? Zoom has them in these weird little encrypted formats that I can't open up while I'm in the meeting. Makes perfect sense, right? So I think we're recording. This will be interesting to see. We left off last time, I do believe, with the JSON structure card, and Catalin, you can move your card to done if you want.
Oh, I thought I'd already done that.
Yeah. Let me refresh because
yeah, if it's the color scheme one, I haven't done it yet.
All right. So we're going to work a little more on this JSON structure card. We didn't quite finish. We had generated the source. We had built the API. We literally had just ingested the data when all was done. And I went fast. Okay. And afterwards, after we had stopped the record, lots of questions started popping up. And I felt really bad about the fact that I went through this insanely fast. So we're going to take time and we're going to go through this. We may take a look at the pipeline, the build pipeline, because that's another YAML file. Would be putting it on GitHub pages, and I've been fighting with that on another project all day today. So I'm well versed in the oddities that have to happen there, although we'll still have to look it up and find the pieces. Get that out of the way. There we go. So if we get done there, we'll start over there. We probably won't finish over there. Okay. We do need to pull some things in because that's like an expert. We'll pull that in the backlog because that should be in this cycle. We need to decide kind of what we're going to do next as we move forward. Okay. Because this will probably take, these two might take today and the next session. But we can start to display grade levels. We can start to display the basic banner and the select assistance. We need to come up with images, logo, fab icon kind of stuff, which I have a sketch on something. And if we have anybody with any graphic skill, you don't want my graphic skill. Mine's horrible. And somewhere along the way, we want to look at what color scheme we want. So that's probably something we want to wire into that one too. So research tests, anybody can pick up anywhere along the way. We need to create some basic tests, update our data, start adding some more in there. But I want to bring these up here, the basic banner, grade level selection, and the assistance card. That's the crawl, walk, run card. So these are really kind of some of the basic things. And I think we have most of the data to do these without much trouble. So let's go back into this JSON structure one and see what we did last time. Okay. So we do have that in a branch. I don't think we need to look over here to see what's happening. Did I show enough last time? Stick your hand up if I did not show enough last time on what the runs look like in the actions. Oh, Catalin, thank you for posting. So I need to show more. Okay, so let's go back through then. Take a look. Some of these we might be able to get to, might not. Part of the problem that I had last time was the GitHub status. And there it is. GitHubstatus.com is where it actually went. And it shows their statuses. Oh, that's great. Sorry. Here we go. Let's go back to dark mode. Cheat. Sometimes it breaks the site. In this case, it didn't. And look, everything's running normally. Well, I came in the other day and actions and pages were red. After trying to figure out why my action didn't fire for 4 hours, come to find out they were running. So, even us old cranky seniors screw it up once in a while too, right? So let's see what we have in here. When I was re-recording the other night, I got some weird data out of here once in a while. But if we look, we have this material UI one. This probably would have been the first time that Catalin pushed his up, and he had an old version of the YAML file. The YAML files are per branch. So if you have a merge master into it, which I did later here, you run with that most recent version of it, which could be the wrong one. In this case, it was the wrong one. So the job did complete. It did fail. Down here, you can see it was a node issue. It had to do with our versioning. I did actually get it to run with the 12 version later, which seemed odd, but let's skip out of that for a second. Oh, and let's pull up the file. And we'll bring this over here, and I'm going to open a recent folder, and this is going to be how to take a test project. Now, this is on a slightly different branch. Slightly. Okay, but the core of the YAML file that we're working with here is this on pull request. Okay, so I'm going to pull this over, and I'm going to try and fit both of these on the screen at the same time so we can kind of go through what's going on. Okay, I'm going to cover up this node hash files package lock JSON thing. This is just building a key. Okay, so I copy pasted that. Not 100% sure what it does. Okay, but if we pull that up there, then we'll have that, and we'll be able to look at that on the side. And then if we break this down a little bit, like so, hey, look, we can look at things side by side. All right, so setup job. Okay, there's nothing in here that's a setup job. We're not going to see anything until we see on pull request as a name. Okay, I will say that on pull request name, this one, was the one that drove me absolutely bonkers the very first time I tried to do this. Okay, what we have here is a YAML file that's designed to run our unit tests, and if we pass, it provides a 0 as a response, and if we fail, it provides a 1 as a response, something like that, and it allows us to watch it for that final result in our branch strategy. So when we open a pull request, when we change a pull request, any pull request that is going to go into main will run this. Okay. So the setup job is just the first part. You don't see anything over there. It's basically setting up the operating system. It's getting the GitHub token. It's saying, hey, am I authorized to do this stuff? Okay. Because it's a YAML file running in our repository, it's authorized. We don't have to do anything special to get those permissions set up and configured. It does it all for us. This is all us. And so when it looked at our YAML file, it saw actions checkout, actions cache, and setup node should have been there. There we go. There's setup node. Checkout. Oh, there's setup node. Yeah. So it pulls those repositories. Those are actually repositories somebody created. They created the runner for that action. Okay. I don't know what they look like. I've never gone to look. Okay. So that's a setup. So it just installs the basic things it needs. And then we get this checkout, because one of the checkout action that we have over here, we trigger it to check out. What's it checking out? It's checking out our repository, or how to take a test repository. Okay. And it's really all it's doing. We needed to pull our code into this server. Okay. So think about a repository that you haven't worked on before. You have to pull it down to your local machine before you can do anything, right? That's what we're doing here. We're pulling it to that local machine. It's a little machine. Okay. So we check out our code, and then we have this node 18 one. There's checkout. There's the node 18. See the 18x. Okay, so node 18x. I'll minimize that one, get that out of the way for now. Doesn't do much. It sets up node 18, because we need node 18 to be able to run the rest of our commands, right? So we set up node with that particular version. Okay. And then we're going to do this cache one. It's going to use the path.npm. It's going to pull this key, and it's going to restore something. And this is what they told me to do to make it work. Thank you. You can thank my son. My dinner's just got here. Dairy Queen for dinner. All right. So cache runner. Okay. So we can actually look at what the setup does here, but that's, you know, it's really exciting stuff. It's what we saw over there, right? Then we come down in here on the actions and cache. Okay, the save state command is deprecated, and it's going to be removed soon. Okay, no big deal. Cache not found. There is no cache yet. Okay, well, there is going to be a time when there's no cache, right? When your YAML file tries to run. Because you have to run at least once to get the cache. This would be the one that ran to get the first run of cache. And then we try and run our test, which is npm CI and npm run test. And I would guess you haven't seen the npm CI other than me yet talking about it. So let's go look up the npm CI command. We don't want npm -CI. There we go. What is npm CI? Clean install. So we have npm install, we have npm clean install, meant to be used in automated environments, test platforms, continuous integration deployment. Or in any situation, make sure you want to clean install your dependencies, installs dependencies directly from the package lock. So it's not looking at your package JSON file. Is that enough, or do you want me to find more of a description? That's good. All right, got a thumbs up from somebody, so I'm going to go with that. All right, so what happened? Well, it tried to install, and it said, install a clean project, blah, 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 blah. It crashed actually on the npm CI and said error, completed with an exit code of 1. And yeah, so it just bombed. Can only install with an existing package lock JSON, shrink wrap, or lock file version 1, run install, or npm 5, or later to generate the package lock file. It is possible his branch didn't have the package lock. I doubt it. Okay. So for whatever reason, it failed tests. My guess is it had to do with the install, which means we didn't have to run a post run cache because we didn't install anything, because post run cache is looking at the node modules. And we didn't have to do much on the post node 18, but we did have to do a post checkout. Okay, so we checked out our code, and it's going to override a post checkout. I don't know exactly what all it's doing. It's a cleanup. And then it completes the job, which then shuts down the server. Okay, let's go see the next one, see what happened. See how we got from failure to success. All right, so this would be the next one that ran. It actually did work, and what happened essentially was I merged in the right YAML file that had the, well, apparently this isn't the one that had the 12s, or isn't the one that had the new versions, the 3s. It had the old versions. But we ran a setup job. This should look familiar. We ran a checkout. Should look familiar. We set up node 18. No change there. Actions cache. Well, we got a warning. And cache not found, which we still haven't created one yet because this part never worked. Then we got an npm run CI. Hey, look, this worked. It's running CI, and then it's running test in a shell bash script. Okay. And some file deprecated. You've all seen an npm install, right? Should look kind of familiar from essentially there to there, right? If you've done an npm install anywhere along the way, that I hope that looks familiar. Then we run ng test, which is the Angular test. Okay, we could have run an npm run. In fact, I think we did. We ran an npm run test. And if we look at our npm run test in our package, npm run test runs ng test. Okay, let's go back to our YAML file. Put that back over there. Okay. Thank you for turning the mic off, whoever that was. So it's running ng test, and this is the generate browser application. If you haven't run the ng test, we can run it once manually on our local machine so you can see it. But it does this little spinny thing with this icon over here, and then it generates your bundles, and then you get the Karma server starts up, and it's actually starting up a local host with Chrome headless, which is one of the ones we had to configure it for. And then it connects to that Chrome headless. It's a server, but it just isn't running in a browser. Okay. And it executes our tests 1, 2, 3, 4, and however many we had. In this case, we fixed this last time, but there was a message, an error message relating to the material slide toggle. Okay. This is one where this is not a test error. This is an error that occurs on the running of the test, but it's not an actual test exception error, so it doesn't fail the test. Okay, this is an error in the running of Angular within the test. Because it's an Angular error and not a test error, the tests still pass. Okay. And we went into last time how to add the map slide toggle. We'll take a quick peek at that again here. Since it's not a known element, we had to make sure it was a known element, which just basically meant we had to add it to the test file. And everything finished. And because everything finished this time, this post run actions cache had something to do. It cleaned up. It said, hey, my cache size is now 68 meg about. Cache save. Cache saved with a Linux key. Then it does a post node cleanup, post checkout cleanup, and completes the job. So what we should see, since this was the first one that passed, if we looked at the next one that passes, what should we look for here? We should probably look for our cache when we first run the cache before the test, right? This is a 0-second run. The test is a 40-second run. I want to take a quick peek at, let's go back one. This one. Let's see how long is that. Okay, 46 seconds. It saved us a whole 6 seconds. Okay, but it took 8 seconds to save the cache. So we actually, did it save us time? I don't know. Probably not in the long run. But overall, it will. Okay. So when it ran this cache, it was actually, oh, it said cache not found. Look at that. It didn't find a cache for this one. But on the post run, did I click on the wrong one then? That was for Angular. It was number 13. Let's go back and look. Number 13. That was the 13th pull request. Yeah, so it should have had cache in there to pull. Okay. Let's check the next one, see if it did anything. So maybe that's not why we're not seeing it. Maybe the caching is having problems. Oh, look at that. Here we go. Cache v3 received. Right? It pulled that 68 meg down in 2 chunks. So cache restored this time. Apparently one of those times the cache wasn't quite there yet. Then it was able to run the test. So 2 seconds to pull the cache down. Now our 40-second runs are now 30-second runs. Okay. Clean up an extra 2 seconds in there. So we're at what, 35 seconds as opposed to ballpark about 50 seconds. That's improvement. Okay. If this were a bigger project and took longer, that'd be a significant helper, right? So that's what happened there. Did we answer enough of what's going on in that? Thumbs up, down? Okay. I got 2 people I can see that are giving me thumbs up. We're depending on them for everything tonight. All right. So the next piece we went into and did was, if I remember right, we took a look at the test where we brought in the material UI, right? So one of these had conked out because we had a page. Did I take it? Oh, I know what I didn't do. Hang on. I can't show it to you yet because this is the one reason I brought this. I need to fetch the origin. There's a reason I need to do that. I have this branch open, but I haven't brought master or main into this yet. So we're going to open up a terminal. Let's bring this up here. And we're going to do a get merge main. All right, we had a conflict. Love conflicts. They're fun. All right. Resolving conflicts. We had a conflict in the module. That's okay. Okay. Current change. This is where this always confused me because current change versus incoming change. What I look at in this case is the incoming change is the one we're pulling down. Okay. Which had the map slide toggle brought in. You can see up here, it had no problem with that, but it didn't know what to do here. Seems really strange it didn't know what to do there, but that's okay. We're going to accept the incoming change. I always read, and then I look up here and I say, okay, accept incoming change. Click, there we go. And for proper styling, we'll put a comma there. Okay, and if you really want to be fancy, the app, why do we have 2 app routing modules? That's weird. Surprised it didn't complain about that. Yep. App routing module. Yeah. We have HTTP client module that we're not using. So something got out of whack here. Yeah, we do need that. I know we need that. Something's really wonky. that back in there. I know we need that one, so I don't know what happened. All right, so resolve.
Yeah, I don't have 2 in mind, so I don't know what's going on.
Sometimes on merges, it gets a little weird. Okay, so it should, as soon as we save. I don't know why we're getting this resolve merge editor either. Complete merge. We'll fix it. Man, we should be good now. All right. And I don't want to do the commit through there. What I do is I come over here, all conflicts resolved, continue merge, and then push to origin. All right, so we should now be up to date. Okay, now that we brought all the code down. And so app module should be right. I'm going to hold my breath. Not going to hold my breath on that one yet, but we'll double check a couple of things. We now have the mat slide toggle in here. And part of what we fixed was we had to bring the mat slide toggle module in to the test. Okay. Because this is what's used to set up and run our Angular component. Okay. Because it didn't have the mat slide toggle, that's why we got that error, because it didn't recognize that tag. Okay. By bringing it in, it's saying, hey, we're going to use this tag somewhere in our code. That way it'll stop complaining about it. Okay, so we should be able to run an ng test. I told you we were going to run that somewhere in here. So let's run that ng test so you can see that it looks kind of like what we saw in the actions, other than not black and white. Okay. There we go. And it runs the tests. Oh, and we crashed the test. We broke something. That's fine. Let's figure out what. Oh, and this could be, I know what this is. Okay. So we didn't get the 4 because we added some new pieces in on this branch. Okay. And that's okay. It ran tests. 2 failed, 2 succeeded. Okay. We can see API handler service and home component failed. Had nothing to do with the app component that Catalan had worked on. Okay. So let's take a look at fixing these here, but let's take a look at the code that we wrote first. Okay. So what I want to point out real quick is we had some folks that jumped in and put a whole bunch of stuff into our test JSON file. So we'd have something to look at when we get there, and something we can start to play with and think about how we want things set up. Okay. I don't know if it's 100% right or wrong. It is what it is at the moment. Okay. This is in assets, so we can't directly import it into the project. We can import, we set things up last time so that we can import JSON files. But it's JSON files within the source code because it has to compile that. Assets is outside of the source code. Assets is at the root of the project when it's running. So you can do it, you treat it like an API call to get the JSON file. Okay. I probably didn't explain that well enough last time. But I think also in the config, we had set up this endpoints where we have the test in here. And we may change this name later for, you know, something like local and remote. So when we have an actual database, we can differentiate between where we are. Easy, kind of cool stuff to do. Okay, we have 1 grade level in here now. To move forward, we're going to put all of them in, no big deal. We can fix that later. Okay, but then we put in, no, didn't do anything with header. I think it was it in the home component? I think it was in the home, it was in the home component. Okay, so home component does 2 things, 3 things. We bring in the API service. Okay, service is just a class, no big deal. We're instantiating API service. Okay, what Angular does, we'll take a look at the service in a minute. The service is spun up at the beginning if it's set up right. Okay. And it's always running, so you don't have to worry about it shutting down and coming back up. We don't have to use the this, even though this constructor, when we set this up, builds a this.api. It's inside the constructor, so you can drop the this portion of it off. Okay. So api.test, and there's a test object we have in there that we can subscribe to. Okay. When anything changes on this test object, it then, because of the subscription, will fire this handler. Okay. The handler is this function right here. And all it does is console log at this point. But that subscription is never going to fire other than the initial default state until we actually fire the get test function, which triggers an actual API request. Okay, so we've separated our trigger to get data and a receipt of the data. They're completely separate. Okay, so I don't have to do anything where I do, the value equals awaiting and that kind of stuff. Okay, complete separation of those two. Now let's take that and let's get rid of the terminal. That ain't gonna hurt us. And let's take a look at our service and see these two side by side, which I know we didn't do last time. Okay, so a service has this injectable provided in root, which just basically means spin it up when the application starts. Right? When it starts running on your local machine, this is one of the first things that should happen, is all the services should get spun up in the background. Okay. And it's just a class. That's all it is. Don't get real wrapped up on the fact that it's a service. A service gives us kind of this place that doesn't have any HTML associated with it, no significant impact on the DOM. Okay. Test is what we saw over here, which is a behavior subject. Behavior subjects are really cool because they can give you an empty object. It gives us that default state. We don't have to deal with undefined or null. Okay. Spend any time working with TypeScript, and undefined or null will come and bite you. It's a pain to deal with. Okay. We grab the endpoints. Remember that configuration endpoints up in the constants? We just grab the endpoints so that we have it to use in our get tests. Okay. We have a get URL we created that allows us to pass it a key and look into endpoints and grab the key. Well, we know the key for tests was tests, right? So if we come over here, let's do that. Let's bring that constants up. So the key for that is tests, right? So essentially, it's using the endpoints here, which is the config endpoints, which is this endpoints. Here in the get test, we're passing that function the key. So I'm clearly told it which key it is. I make it really easy to find this stuff and figure out what you're doing, right? Keys can be complex. Right now, the key is really simple. How many times have you had a URL where you've had to inject some portion of data into that URL for a post or a get or something like that, right? Well, we can add something in here to do like a text replace right after we get the URL, okay? So the URL then is used in our get request. That's all it is, simple get request. If we're a post, you could put comma and pass the data. This is just a get request. We're not doing anything fancy. Okay, and normally the pattern I used to use was to do a dot to promise. I needed to convert that to a promise. A get request is an observable in Angular. I talked a little bit about observables last time. Observables are, think of it like a stream of thought. Okay. Initially, this observable is going to be an empty object. We define that up here. As we fire the get request, it's going to say, hey, the next value is, here's what I got on the API request. Okay, on the get. Because it's an observable, we're using the first value from RxJS to say, take this, the observable, and all I want is first value. After that, forget about this observable. Because a get request observable is a one-time thing. It doesn't run multiple times. It only runs once. Okay, so I'm using RxJS to turn Angular's observable into essentially a value. It's going to wait for that to get finished. Okay, the first value from function returns a promise. So it converts it to a promise, essentially. Then we then can wait for it to be finished, and we get the data cleanly on this side. It's easy to read that way. Okay, and then we take test and we pass it the next data point. So how does all this work? Okay, well, what we should be seeing when it runs is this whole thing will spin up. It'll set up the subscription. It's watching the behavior subject. Nothing else, right? Then the component gets initialized, and on initialization says, hey, go get my data. Which then comes over here. This function says, hey, get me the URL. Okay, got the URL. Give me the first value after the get request. Put that on data, pass the data to test. That puts it up here, which then triggers this handler to fire because we subscribed, which then console logs. Okay. There is one potential glitch. I don't run into it very often, but it's one you should be aware of if you start running into memory leaks. Okay, if your app crashes because of memory problems, I've run into that once in the last 5 years. Okay, so it's not very prevalent. These subscriptions don't automatically go away. So it is possible that this behavior subject observable can have theoretically hundreds of subscriptions tied to it that it's trying to fire off to, even though this component has been shut down and reopened multiple times. There are patterns for ng on destroy where you can get rid of those subscriptions when you don't need them. Okay. Like I said, one time in 5 years, I've seen that. I'm not going to stress on that for this application. If we start to see a memory leak, that's where we typically would look first. Okay. This is what's called a pub sub pattern. If you've ever heard a pub sub pattern, publish, subscribe. Okay. We have something here that can handle publishing, which is the .next, and subscribe. That's all it is. But it allows us to separate our concerns. Makes it easy to test. I don't need to test the behavior subject. That's already behavior that they know works right. I don't have to test endpoints. That's a configuration. Yeah, I got to test this. That shouldn't be too hard to manually change that to something else and plug a key in and see what happens. And then the test here, I have to test two things. I have to test the try and I have to test the catch. Pretty basic stuff. Okay. So when you talk about testing functions, that then becomes really easy. Okay. Component-wise, Angular does things a little bit differently. We haven't written the tests here yet. We can test what's on the DOM. Okay. I typically don't. My preference with Angular has been just test the functions you've created. In fact, what I would normally do is something like this. I'll do this .init. And then I'm going to move this, because I don't want to test the ng on init. That's Angular. But I can test this function that I created called init. Yeah, pretty right. There we go. See, now what this tells me is that I'm testing my functions, the functions I wrote. I can write ng on init. I don't want to test ng on init. I want to test the init that's fired from it. Okay, it's a weird little separation of concerns, but that's the way I tend to prefer to do it. It makes it very clear what I have to test and what I don't. Okay, I don't have to test what happens in constructor. I don't have to test what happens in any of the Angular or class portions of this. I have to test any code I write. Okay, these aren't hard to test. Okay, so now we've got a rough idea. Let's go through and test. And the way I normally do my tests when I'm writing new code is first thing I'm going to do is any working code. Okay, I made a change here. Any working code I want to push up. So let's bring our tool back. And let's see, moved code to the init for testing. Okay. All right. Did everybody find the login stuff or the attendance stuff? Most? Okay. Somebody's monitoring in the chat thread, so I'm not going to stress on that too much. So what I normally do when I'm going to write tests, I've already pushed it up, so I don't have any like clear indicator of what files I've changed. I like to push them up as separate commits. Okay, my preference. So I work from the top down. I don't have to worry about anything in constants or interfaces and services. Yeah, I did work on the API handler service. So I have a service here and I have a test suite. And clearly I'm not testing everything in my service, right? As I said, don't have to test the behavior subject, don't have to test endpoints. We might have to change endpoints, but don't have to test it. We probably are going to have to bring in HTTP client or something to handle that, because if you remember when we ran those tests, we had that big honking error. Right? Let's go look at the big honking error. I got a mild, not a hit. I got time to do this. All right. Doesn't matter where we run it from. We'll just run that test. We want to see what the error is because I guarantee you it has to do with HTTP. And that's how I knew it was home component, because the home component failed on it too. API handler service, home component. Okay. This is one I see all the time. Null injector error. Blah, 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 blah. The second line is what you really want, null injector error, no provider for HTTP client. Well, we didn't provide it in our test suite. Right? So what I do is we'll just copy this. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to paste this up here. And yeah, you're going to find a lot of them. So we come in here, we look, and I apologize for that being really bright. Let's accept all cookies. And he's got this code. Yes, HTTP client. Then he's got, yep, look, there's an error. And he's looking through and he's sending me all kinds of data we don't need. To resolve this problem, make it available in the app. Yeah. HTTP client module, good. Good. Problem is, this is not a unit test. And this is for the project, the main project itself. So that's off. Okay, so let's go back and say unit test. Clearly somebody searched that one before, right? Angular. I've added it. And then we got this thing, and here's a test. We brought in HTTP client module, unit providers. That's wrong. Okay. So in your test, imports, and not a provider. Okay. But here's the better way, is to mock it. The HTTP client testing module. Okay, we want to import that. So let's go down. Oh, somebody already has it here as an import ready to go. And that goes into imports. So we come over here and, oh, really minimize that down. I didn't know I could do that. All right, so we'll put that up there. And remember we said it was in imports, so we don't have much being imported yet. All right, well, that's one. And it also errored on home component. So we basically do the same thing on home component, right? So let's go throw that in its test, and then we'll figure out any other tests we have to write later. Let's just see if we can fix this problem really quick. Okay, so we have declarations, home component. We need imports. Clearly, we don't have any linting on, but let's see if we can get rid of these two errors by bringing that in. It's got a way of handling HTTP. Okay. Here comes the exciting part, watching the little dots move. Oh, we got green. We got green. Oh, we got a console log in there somewhere too, hiding. We do have a console in our code. And I'll show you what we do with that. Probably not today with 17 minutes left. I don't know, maybe we'll see. But we have 4 passing tests. Not a lot of tests, but 4 passing tests, right? So now let's take a look at actually improving our test. All right, so we started with the API handler service, and I'm going to move this to the bottom so we can have a clearer space to write with. Is this big enough for everybody to see? Okay. All right, so we need to test the get URL. So the test suite wraps around it. Give it a string. This is your string description. That's what we see down here when it fails. Expect. I want to write this in kind of an English language. When usually when I'm telling it a function, I'll wrap the function in quotes because it makes it easy to search when the test suite gets longer. Nice to be able to search those quickly that way. Okay, expects get URL to return the correct URL. All right, so we either have to know one of the existing keys, or we can fake one. We say service, and it's probably better for tests than we fake one. We add one on. Okay, dot inputs. And since we're using this dot inputs, we can say test And it's not liking that, and I probably know why. It comes with index signature, so it must be accessed this way. All right, so quick fix. There we go. And it's going to equal a string. Doesn't have to be a real one, right? In fact, I like to make it obvious it's not a real one. So we just added that to endpoints in our code. So then our get URL, we need a key. What's our key? Oh, gee, there's our key. So we could get really fancy and do this. Right? Now we want to say const result. We know is a type string equals service dot get URL key. And my expectation would be that the result equals, I'm going to talk a couple things here in a second. Test URL. All right, so I just wrote a unit test. And most of you probably haven't seen these unit tests, let alone Angular unit tests, right? So what did we do? Okay, first thing on unit tests is you do setup, you act, and you evaluate it. Okay, assert, act, and expect are the three. Okay, so we did our setup. Okay, I determined I needed a key. I had to put some fake data onto service endpoints. This is my setup. I always separate my setup and my execution. Okay, just makes it easier to read. And then here, I actually executed the service get URL. Well, where does service come from? Service is set up here. Okay, so when our test suite was built, service was created of type API handler service. Since we imported that, that's the one we're testing, right? API handler service. We did our configuration, which brought in the HTTP, and then the service variable got the testbed injection of API handler service, which uses this configuration. Okay, so essentially it set up a mock standalone version of the service for us. Okay. It does have to take into account anything we injected into the service, in this case, HTTP. We handled that with the HTTP client testing module. That's the one that works. It's the easiest way to do it. Okay. So we're executing service get URL, which is this function over here, knowing we've already built a key onto endpoints. It should return test URL. Okay, and then just the proper language is expect result to equal test URL. You can say to be. They pretty much are the same. There are some other ones in there. I always prefer to equal. It's the same between every test suite I've ever used. Makes it easier for me when I work in multiple test suites, having the same language. Okay, but you can see how this almost all reads as a sentence, right? So now we got it in here. Let's save our file because it's the one I always mess up in trying to run my tests, and see if we now get 5 tests fast instead of 4, or 4 tests pass and 1 fail. It's going to be one of the two. We have 50-50 chance. A little better than 50-50, I would hope. Look at that, 5 successes. Okay. Get tests. This one's going to take us a little bit longer to write because we need to write 2 tests. So we're going to do another expects get tests to get data. Okay, that'll work. I missed the comma again twice. All right. I have been typing period instead of comma all day. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I haven't got a clue. All right. So first thing we want to do here, we want to set ourselves up, right? So I can see one of the things that I want to do is I've got this get URL, and I'm going to control what it gives here. Okay. So we're going to spy on. This is the first time we've used a spy. Spies are really prevalent in Angular, a lot more so than mocks. In fact, we have almost no mocking capability in Angular. We can create mocks, but there aren't test mocks. But we're going to spy on service. And then you have to name the function inside quotes. So get URL. And we're going to return value URL. So I'm just controlling what it's giving it, okay? And then looking down here, I do something with this first value from maybe. But we know this HTTP GET is an observable, right? So can we handle this? Well, yes, we can. We're going to do it through a SPY. And I may actually have to look up exactly what I want to do here, but I want to spy on the service .http. I want to spy on the GET. And oh, it's because HTTP is private. We have to put this inside the quotes. Yeah, no quick fix. Like that. That's how you access private. And we're going to return value again. Only in this case, I think it's one of two cases. I think we need of. And I haven't used it in a while. It's an RxJS of that returns an observable. See up top. Okay. So we can tell it what to return. And this is our data. We haven't given any data yet. So let's make data. And if we look over here, data is any, so it doesn't matter what we give it. Okay, so we're going to return data. So my hope is when we're on this, that data gets assigned over here, the string data we have over there. Okay. And then we have the next data that we have to watch to see what's assigned. So we have one more SPY to create. The function next on it. We're just going to stub it because we don't want to do anything. And then we need to run. Okay. So we're going to do a service get test. And we're going to expect, we only need to really watch one thing. Service, test, next. Spelled service wrong. There we go. To have been called with. So did it call that function? What did it call it with? Well, it should have called it with data, right? You can see how we spied on the different parts and said, hey, I want to control what happens as it flows through this. In fact, we're going to write one that fails, that goes through the catch. And because we're going through the catch, we can actually control and have it send an error message, which is kind of cool. Okay, but let's make sure this one works first. Well, if it doesn't work, I got to figure out which of the observable ones it is for that of. And the places where I have that, we're going to have to go look it up online somewhere. Keep your fingers crossed. Oh, SPY to called with. Expect SPY to have been called with, but it was never called. Oh, yeah, we got one simple problem here. This is an async function. So when you see that, it's never called. First think, is it async? Oh, that wasn't async. This is async. Right? Async await. Guess what we have to do? We have to await that. Right? I don't see any heads nodding up and down, so I probably lost a few people right there. All right, so we may not get to the failure portion of this till next time, given we have 5 minutes left, but we do have 6 succeeding tests. Okay, so let's go through this. The get URL test should have been pretty straightforward. Should have been anything to really boggle your mind. Okay, the fact that we got this error when something wasn't called, whenever I see one that says, hey, this function was never called, the first thing I look at always is it an async function? This is an async function, which means I need to make my test async as well. Okay. If my test is an async, it's not waiting. So it's not called with data at the time it reaches the expect. Because it awaits right here, when it's finished, now we know it was called. okay? There's a delay that happens right there on that await. There's enough of a delay that it hasn't reached this line if that await's not in there on the test side, okay? So what all did we do here? We spied on the get URL. I didn't really have to spy on the get URL as long as it could get that key, okay? You don't really have to. I'm controlling. I like to control things. We spy on the HTTP GET, and we send an observable with some data. Later on the next one, we're going to send it. We're going to trigger an error message at that point in time. But we don't have enough time to get to that yet. But the next piece we have to do is, since we've sent that back, it goes through, that's the first value coming back in that observable, right? So first value of clears the await because we awaited there. Data gets assigned the string data. Then it goes to test next and passes it data, which we've already spied on and stubbed. Stub means stop it from doing anything. We could spy on and pass through if we wanted to, which means it would actually assign that to the behavior subject, but we don't really have any need to in this case, okay? Either one would work. I tend to prefer to stub it in that case, okay? We can spy on any function stub. We can spy on functions that return values and control what happens. So we're going to spy on, for the next set of tests, next time, this return value, and when it fires the get, we're going to trigger an error message. And because we're triggering the error message in here, it's going to immediately jump to the catch handler and console log. Now, because of that, we're going to have to do a couple little weird little things with console log. There's a helper we'll want to set up, which we don't have set up yet. It'll go in the shared folder. I tend to spy on console log and essentially stub it out so I don't get these weird little logs if I forget to put and leave a console log in my code. Okay, that's me. I like a nice clean test run. But it also gives me capacity, since I'll have that pre-stubbed out for the entire test suite. I can actually use that spy over here and say, hey, did the console log actually get fired? Did it give the error that I passed it? Kind of cool. Okay, so it makes the testing a little bit easier in my mind. So because of that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say to do write the failing unit tests. Wow, somebody has a microphone. That was really loud in my ear. All right. So that'll be enough to let me know where we were. And let's go over here and unit test coverage. And we're going to push. Okay, so that branch has the latest code. I always like to put the code up at the end of my day. I really hate those days when it's like, oh, something happened and I can't get my code on my local machine. That's scary stuff, right? Computers bomb out on us. All right, so let's go back to our board real quick. And so we're still working on the JSON structure. We'll get that again. And probably get to the pipeline on the next one. Okay, so now that we spent a little bit of time digging on the tests, I want to go through the error one probably as long as we did on the regular passing one. Okay, almost all API calls I make follow that identical pattern. Okay, and there are some nice reasons why I do this pattern, and I think I've talked about it, which is, you know, if I had to adjust this data before we use it, I got it's just as easy as coming in here and looping through the data and doing a map, right? And then you push that mapped version up over here. You could even do a for each and manipulate the data raw as it comes in. I like that ability to adjust. You know, just think about, when would you adjust? Well, the simplest one that I could bring up, the simplest one that I can share is date timestamps. Right? Get that really ugly, really long string with a Z in the middle or T in the middle, Z in the end kind of thing, showing you that it's UTC time. Nobody ever wants to see that, right? They want to see March 7th, 2013, right? This gives us a chance to create a display version. I try not to manipulate the original data. So if my original data looked something like date, time, stamp, whatever it is, bunch of numbers and letters, right? I want to modify it so I get something like display date time. That way I don't modify the original. I loop through and I create a new key for that new value. So then the original data is always there. That way, if you run into some weird problem and you're going, why is it showing tomorrow? You can go back and actually compare the raw data next to your updated data. Okay. But this pattern is one I use in Angular a lot. And it works really, really well for our gets, posts, all of our different status types there. The tests are pretty similar. I mean, they don't change much. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns?
I think to have been called with is one of the craziest things we've ever seen. We just haven't worked with Jest that much.
I was going to say, if that's as crazy as it gets, wow. Okay. Well, let's see what Jest's version of that looks like. It has a to have been called with. There's our functions. They're using Axios in this case. Where's our test suite? Come on. That is a really long setup. This would, if I saw this in code you tried to give me, I'd be like, There you go. Yeah. I like when they're the same from one to the next.
It is helpful.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of crazy, yeah. You know, you can return values instead of return value. In my case, I try and keep them simple. I don't want to, you know, why would I ever want it to make multiple calls? That scares me. You know, there are a couple places where it gets a little tricky on multiple calls, and it usually has to do with dealing with the observables having default value. There's no way this can fire a GET request and you can watch this test and only see one value come out, because you're always going to get the initial value plus the new value when the GET request is called. Cindy, did you have a question? I saw the mic change for like a split second.
No, my husband's on the phone in the background with a appliance repairman, so you may be getting microphone pickup from that, but thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I mean, I know this is a lot. You know, you're learning a new framework on top of tests, and please ask. Now's the time to do it. Don't want people to get too lost. If you got the question, I guarantee somebody else does too.
I think it's pretty straightforward. Just seeing it over and over again, we'll start to get used to it.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll wrap up the failing unit test. I mean, it's not a failing unit test. It's a unit test that will fail the function that pushes us into the catch block. We need to look at the header component tests, which shouldn't be much because we have no code in here. The home component has two functions that should be really easy to test, especially once we put the console log in. We have nothing in shared, but we will when we get there. Okay. Yeah, and then we'll get into the pipeline after that, and you know, we'll start looking at some of these things too. I think when we get into the grade level selection, that'll be a fun one. I'm wondering if somebody wants to pick up and kind of start on that one. I don't know. This could be one that, I mean, the very first thing we'd need is, right now we only have one grade level here. We would need 3rd through 8th, high school and adult. So we have something to loop over and display, and then I can walk somebody through how to do that. Or not.
I'll do it.
Or I can do it all. I don't care.
I'll do it.
All right. So when you do that, part of what you'll think about is you get that data in there. Okay, this is an array, right? So what you want to do is create a new component, and it's going to be a feature. So ng generate component features slash, I don't know what we want to call it. Grade level selections. I don't care, whatever you want to call it, something along those lines. And so what you're going to do is ingest that data. So it's just going to be a straight import initially on that new component. Okay. Once we have that attached on the variable, I'll show you how to loop through that. Okay. And actually, probably next time with the JSON structure, one of the things I wanted to do with the JSON structure is we're ingesting that data here on this handler, but we're not doing anything with it. So I'll attach that to a data, which will be slightly different because you're going to import the JSON. We're reading it in via GET request. That is part of the config JSON. So you can do an import and attach right here. But actually displaying the data outside of the console log, displaying the data in the HTML, I'll be showing how to do that probably next time too. So then you can pick up on that and move forward with that part of it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right.
When does the handler run again? Or like at what causes the handler to run, I guess?
Anytime, let me see. Let's move this over here. Here we go. So test is an observable. Anytime we run a test.next, that triggers any subscriptions to fire. Okay. This handler is a function that's passed to the subscriptions. So the test subscriber holds all the functions that have been passed to it. Because they have their own bound it knows it runs here. Okay, so when this runs, it loops through all of those subscriptions that have been attached to it, executes their functions, which in this case is the handler, passing it data. It passes through whatever it's been passed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, okay,
Almost
that's
feel
where
like-
the data is in the handler's parameters too. So that's like the same.
No, actually,
Oh.
it could be anything. This could be items, as long as these two match. So this data is passed to the actual function. The function takes in one type, one object. In this case, it's any. So it could be an object, it could be a string, it could be whatever.
Okay, but that whatever's in there comes from the
From the subscription.
observable.
Yes. So
Okay.
when you fire the observable.next, as I said, it loops through all those attached functions and passes whatever it was given, in this case, data on that right side. And it loops through and it fires function, open paren, data, close paren, over and over and over again until it gets through all the subscriptions.
Okay.
So this handler was passed to it. So it fires handler passing it data, which then becomes items here to be used. Consumed.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, those two data is just happen to be what I used for names. It's not locked in at that. If I knew that this data coming in was an object, I could over here, I can deconstruct it as it comes in.
Okay.
So if I knew it was an object with 3 keys, I could deconstruct those 3 keys right here.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
Sure. Anything else?
Nope, go eat your dinner.
All right, let me stop the record. Where did my record button go? Stop record.